Hi, I'm Magnus Lind from Treasury Peer. Today is the 18th of December 2012 and I'm going to meet and interview Charles Bean, Deputy Governor at Bank of England and also renowned economist. I'm going to address the questions to him in both his roles. Hi Charles.
Hello, nice to see you again, Magnus.
Nice to be here again and thank you for having us at the Bank of England. The financial crisis has turned into an unemployment crisis. So what do you think the future of the corporate sector will be compared to the past?
Well, as you say, unemployment has risen really in all the advanced economies as a result of the financial crisis and the subsequent recession. Different amounts in different countries. Here it rose less than we feared, up to about 8%. The US obviously up to about 10%. The Euro area 12%, and some countries in the Eurozone, like Spain, are talking about 25% unemployment rate. So that's where the cost of the recession is obviously visible. Now the corporate sector, the private sector generally, has a key role in tackling that. We've seen public sectors retrenching as part of getting their budget deficits down. That's happening in this country. And we need the private sector to take up the slack. Now, the good news here is that the private sector has been creating jobs, something like 1 million jobs since the middle of 2010, despite the weakness in output growth that we've seen. And that's clearly a good sign, but there's still a long way to go.
Are the largest inhibitors that remain for the corporate sector job creation in the UK?
Well, I think the first thing I'd focus on is just the weakness of demand and the poor demand outlook. We've seen relatively little growth over the past couple of years. Consumer incomes have been squeezed in part by higher energy prices and higher VAT. On top of that, there's uncertainty about the outlook as well, particularly in connection with how Eurozone issues are going to unfold. That's an inhibitor to business investment. And on top of that, some businesses may struggle to get finance. I think this is less of an issue for the bigger companies. They can often access the capital markets as well as the banks. The small and medium-sized enterprises often rely on the banks. The banks are still repairing their balance sheets after the financial crisis. And we do hear stories of smaller companies struggling to get credit or having to pay quite a lot for it.
What can the Bank of England do to help small companies, but in general also create corporate jobs?
Well, as far as we're concerned, basically we've taken, I think, 3 primary actions to help things along. First of all, obviously we cut our main policy rate very sharply down to a historic low of 0.5% relatively early on in the crisis after the collapse of Lehman Brothers. But to inject further monetary stimulus, we've taken a second step, so-called quantitative easing, whereby we buy government debt from pension funds, hedge funds and the like, paying for it with essentially money that the Bank of England creates. But the key thing is that the people that we bought it from will then go out and buy other assets instead, things like corporate bonds, private equities. So it increases the availability of funds to corporates through the capital markets. And we think that has been helpful in providing some stimulus to job creation and output growth. And then thirdly, and most recently this summer, we introduced a scheme designed more directly at dealing with the problems in the banking system, and in particular we've seen the funding costs of banks rising, and that's starting to feed through into loan rates. So what we've been doing through our funding for lending scheme is offering banks access to cheaper funding than they can get in the markets, and moreover, it's the case that the more they lend, the cheaper the funding gets. So there's an incentive built in, encouraging them to lend more than they otherwise would have done. It's still early days with that scheme, but we've got about 35 lenders covering about 80% of the lending to the real economy signed up. Funding costs have come down significantly. We're seeing that feeding through into loan rates. It's been most visible so far in lending for mortgages, but we think we're also seeing signs of it feeding through on the rates offered to businesses as well. But obviously we'll be monitoring it going forward and checking that the scheme is having the effects that we expect it to.
Are there any other UK organisations that have some schemes or that also can help with job creation in the corporate sector?
Well, I think it's worth recognising this is a multi-dimensional problem that really all parts of government have some interest in. The government's introduced a number of schemes to help particularly small businesses get finance. Something called the National Loan Guarantee Scheme has recently introduced a supply chain finance initiative again to help smaller firms in supply chains. On the labour market itself, I think one of the reasons why the UK labour market has performed rather better perhaps than we expected, and perhaps better than some of our continental cousins, is the changes that have been made over the past 10-20 years to make it more flexible, more active attempts to try and match the unemployed to jobs, and increase supplying apprenticeships. So there's been a lot going on under the aegis of other departments of government, which is helping to make a dent in the problem.
Yeah, and then we come to the crux. How would you encourage me, or anyone else for that matter, to become an entrepreneur and eventually an employer in the UK?
Well, I think the key thing is that, well, first of all, we think you're absolutely key to addressing the problems that we face in generating enough jobs and getting growth going. The government has taken steps to make it more attractive for businesses to set up. Corporation tax was 28%. It's gradually been cutting that. It's announced plans to get it down to 21% by 2014-15. It's introduced a specially low tax rate for income associated with patents to encourage innovative activity in particular. The big depreciation of sterling that we saw in the early stage of the financial crisis also means that this is a more attractive place to sign a business which is supplying other countries, and one of the things we want to see is an expansion in our net exports to help rebalance our economy. But it requires action on a lot of fronts to achieve what's required.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Thanks for your insights, for your encouragements, and we wish you a great Christmas and a marvellous and interesting 2013.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much, Magnus. Lovely to see you again, and a happy Christmas to you too.
Thank you.